The first corpse I ever saw beneath the Imperial Palace was still warm when I touched it. And for reasons I still cannot fully explain, that small detail became the beginning of my madness. Not the blood pooled beneath its fingers, not the smell of burned incense drifting through ventilation shafts older than entire civilizations, not even the fact that the dead man had no eyes. It was the warmth, because nothing beneath the Palace of Terra was supposed to feel alive anymore. The archives where I worked existed far below the sacred foundations of the Imperial Palace, buried under kilometers of cathedral stone, forgotten machinery, and sealed vaults untouched since the Horus Heresy itself. Most citizens of the Imperium imagined Terra as glorious beyond imagination, a radiant throne world bathed in holy light where billions worshipped beneath golden spires. They imagined giant statues of saints, chanting choirs, and immortal banners fluttering proudly beneath the gaze of the God Emperor. But the real Terra was not glorious. The real Terra was a dying machine wrapped in scripture. Above the surface, billions starved in overcrowded hive towers while nobles drank purified water worth more than entire worker districts. Entire populations vanished into manufactorums without records. Children were born, labored, and died without ever seeing the sky. The air tasted like ash and machine oil. Even the prayers sounded exhausted. Yet beneath all of that, beneath the endless cathedrals, beneath the administratum complexes, beneath the holy processions and propaganda screens, there existed older places, places the Imperium pretended no longer existed. That was where I served. Archive Sector Mortis 9, a tomb for forbidden knowledge. My duty was simple: process recovered records from destroyed systems, catalog heretical material before incineration, and ensure sensitive information never reached unauthorized minds. I had performed this duty for 23 standard years without incident. I believed in the Imperium, perhaps not with the burning fanaticism of ecclesiarchy priests, but with the quiet obedience common among tired men born into endless bureaucracy. The Imperium was cruel, yes, but cruelty was necessary in a galaxy filled with horrors. That was what we were taught since birth. The Emperor protects, humanity endures, sacrifice is survival. I believed those words. I needed to believe them. Everyone did. Then I found the corpse. I'd been sent into an abandoned subsection of the archive to recover damaged data scrolls from a collapsed vault wall, caused by seismic instability somewhere deep below the palace foundations. The corridors there were ancient beyond comprehension. Massive Gothic passageways stretched endlessly through darkness, illuminated only by failing lumen globes, flickering weakly above rusted Aquila symbols. The walls sweated condensation that smelled faintly metallic, and strange whispers echoed through ventilation systems that no longer connected to anything functional. Even veteran archivists avoided those corridors when possible. They claimed the deeper sectors were haunted by the dead. I used to laugh at stories like that. The Imperium had no shortage of superstitious fools, but the moment I entered Vault Corridor 17, something felt wrong. The silence was too complete. Not ordinary silence, the unnatural kind that presses against the ears until even your own breathing feels intrusive. My boots echoed loudly against the metal floor as I moved deeper into the corridor carrying my dim lantern unit. Dust drifted slowly through the darkness like gray snow. Ancient parchment scraps covered the ground in places, their ink faded beyond recognition centuries ago. Then I saw him. The body lay slumped against a broken cogitator terminal near a sealed blast door marked with sigils I did not recognize. At first I thought he was sleeping. His robes identified him as an archivist of some forgotten administratum order, though the insignia stitched onto his chest had been scratched away deliberately. But as I approached, the lantern light illuminated his face, and my entire body froze instantly. He had no eyes, not empty sockets, not mutilation, no eyes at all. Smooth, pale flesh covered the upper half of his face as though eyes had never existed there in the first place. I stumbled backward in horror, nearly dropping the lantern. For several seconds I simply stared, trying to convince myself exhaustion was distorting my vision. But the corpse remained there motionless beneath the weak light. Its mouth hung slightly open in frozen terror. The skin looked unnaturally pale, stretched too tightly across the skull like old paper over bone. Yet despite the corpse's horrifying appearance, there was no smell of decay, no rot, no insects. Hesitantly, I reached forward and touched its wrist. Warm, freshly dead. Impossible. Nobody entered these sectors anymore. Some vaults had remained sealed for thousands of years. Then I noticed the data slate clutched tightly in the corpse's fingers. Its screen still flickered faintly with power. I remember hesitating before taking it. Every instinct screamed at me to leave immediately and report the discovery to my superiors. But curiosity is a dangerous thing in the Imperium, especially for men who spend their lives surrounded by forbidden knowledge. I activated the slate. Static filled the corridor instantly. Harsh, distorted noise crackled from damaged speakers before resolving into a voice, calm, weak, terrified. If you are hearing this, then humanity is already extinct. I nearly laughed from nervousness. Heretical recordings were common in the archives. Cultists, madmen, warp-corrupted prophets. I had cataloged thousands over the years. Most were meaningless insanity. But something about this voice felt different. Exhausted rather than fanatical. Like a man recording his final confession before execution. Project Thanatos confirmed the truth. The voice continued quietly. Baseline human DNA no longer exists within the Imperium. Extinction occurred gradually during Old Night. The species died over 10,000 years ago. My smile disappeared slowly. The corridor suddenly felt colder. The Emperor knew, the voice whispered. They all knew. Static interrupted the recording violently before stabilizing again. In the background, I could hear distant alarms and heavy metallic sounds. We searched 13,000 genetic archives recovered from the dark age of technology. None matched modern Terran populations. None. My hands tightened around the slate unconsciously. Something deep inside me began to feel terribly wrong, though I could not yet explain why. The voice continued speaking, growing weaker with every sentence. The Imperium survives through controlled denial. Citizens must never learn the truth. The species continues biologically altered, psychologically conditioned, spiritually manipulated. A loud crash echoed through the recording. The speaker began breathing heavily. If they discover this archive, they will erase everything. Then came several seconds of silence. Finally, the man whispered one last sentence so quietly I almost missed it entirely. We are not human anymore. The recording ended. Complete silence returned to the corridor. I stood there motionless beside the warm corpse, while distant machinery groaned somewhere deep beneath the palace foundations. My rational mind tried desperately to dismiss everything I had heard as elaborate heresy. Genetic drift across millennia was expected. Humanity had evolved differently across countless worlds. That proved nothing. Yet despite my attempts at logic, fear had already rooted itself inside me, because the corpse beside me still had no eyes. Slowly, almost against my own will, I looked up toward the sealed blast door behind the body. Until that moment, I had not noticed the symbol carved into its surface. An ancient imperial aquila, split directly down the center. Beneath it, barely visible beneath centuries of dust, someone had scratched a sentence into the metal, using what looked disturbingly like human fingernails. The Imperium hid the extinction. Then the corridor lights died all at once. Darkness swallowed everything instantly, and somewhere nearby in the blackness, something moved. The darkness beneath the Imperial Palace did not feel empty. That was the first thing I realized after the corridor lights failed. It breathed. Not literally, perhaps, but the silence around me carried a strange rhythm, as though enormous unseen machinery, somewhere deep below Terra, inhaled and exhaled through the walls themselves. I stood frozen beside the corpse while my lantern flickered weakly in trembling hands. The tiny circle of light it produced suddenly felt pathetic against the endless blackness pressing around me from every direction. Then I heard it again. Movement. Slow, careful, metal scraping softly against metal somewhere farther down the corridor. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but terror locked my muscles in place. The recording still echoed inside my skull. Humanity is already extinct. The words sounded absurd even now, yet something about the corpse beside me made disbelief impossible. I kept staring at its smooth, eyeless face, trying desperately to understand what I was seeing. Was it mutation, some forbidden surgical alteration, warp corruption? But deep down I already knew the answer that frightened me most. The face looked unfinished because whoever, or whatever, the man truly was had not been born human to begin with. My breathing became shallow. I suddenly became aware of my own body in ways I never had before. The stiffness in my joints, the strange pale tone of my skin beneath the lantern glow. Even my heartbeat felt wrong somehow, too steady, too controlled. Another sound echoed through the darkness ahead. Footsteps this time, slow and deliberate. I raised the lantern higher toward the corridor, but the light barely penetrated the blackness. Then, very briefly, I saw movement at the edge of visibility. A tall silhouette crossing the passage far ahead, human-shaped, but not moving correctly. Its limbs seemed too still between steps, as though it simply shifted position instead of walking naturally. I backed away instinctively until my shoulders struck the sealed blast door behind me. The impact sent ancient dust raining from the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, the footsteps stopped immediately. Silence returned. Watching silence. I do not know how long I remained there unable to move. Seconds perhaps, or minutes. Down in the lower archives, time often felt distorted beneath the endless mechanical groaning of Terra's buried foundations. Finally, my survival instincts overcame my fear. I turned away from the corridor and examined the blast door more carefully. The split aquila, symbol carved into its surface, looked ancient, far older than standard Imperial iconography. Strange machine code symbols surrounded it in circular patterns almost resembling ritual markings. Most disturbing of all was the control panel beside the entrance. It still had power. A faint red glow pulsed weakly beneath layers of dust. Impossible. Entire archive sectors lost power centuries ago. Yet this door remained functional. The corpse still clutched something tightly in its left hand. Hesitantly, I knelt beside it again and pried open its stiff fingers. Inside rested a small metallic ident sigil, engraved with symbols matching those on the blast door. The moment I touched it, the corpse's jaw suddenly twitched. I recoiled violently, falling backward onto the cold metal floor. For one horrifying second, I thought the dead man was rising, but the body remained motionless. Only the mouth had moved slightly, frozen now in an even wider expression of terror. My pulse thundered painfully inside my chest. I almost fled right then. If I had, perhaps none of what followed would have happened. But curiosity is a poison few archivists survive forever. I approached the control panel slowly and inserted the ident sigil into the ancient slot beneath the glowing runes. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the corridor shook violently beneath my feet. Deep mechanical sounds echoed through the darkness around me like enormous chains dragging across stone. The blast door began opening with a scream of grinding metal so loud it hurt my ears. Ancient dust exploded outward into the corridor as the seal slowly broke for the first time in ages. Beyond the doorway waited only darkness at first. Then dim red emergency lights flickered alive one by one deep inside the chamber beyond, revealing something that made my blood run cold. Rows. Endless rows stretching far into the distance. Human bodies suspended upright inside massive glass containment cylinders. Thousands of them. Perhaps more. Pale shapes floating silently in murky liquid beneath the red glow. I stepped forward in stunned disbelief as the chamber lights continued activating section by section. The vault was enormous, larger than many hive districts I had seen above Terra's surface. Ancient machinery lined the walls covered in cables thick as tree trunks. Countless. Containment cylinders extended into the darkness like a frozen army trapped in time. Some figures looked skeletal and withered. Others appeared perfectly preserved. Men, women, children. Entire families suspended together in silent, death-like stillness. Their faces looked different from modern imperial citizens. Softer somehow, more expressive. Their features carried subtle emotional depth I could not fully explain. And their eyes, Emperor preserve me, their eyes looked alive even in suspension. I moved slowly between the cylinders, unable to breathe properly. Labels written in ancient Gothic covered each containment unit. Genetic archive, baseline human stock, extinction, preservation protocol, subject, purity, verified. My hands trembled uncontrollably now. The recording had been real, somehow impossibly real. These were humans, actual humans from before Old Night, before the Imperium, before whatever had replaced them inherited the galaxy. Suddenly, a child inside one of the cylinders opened its eyes. I stumbled backward in horror. The young girl floating within the fluid stared directly at me through the glass. Her face looked terrified. Her lips moved weakly against the liquid. For several seconds, I could not understand what she was saying. Then I realized she was repeating the same phrase over and over again. "Please don't leave us." My entire body went numb. The containment cylinders were not preserving corpses. They were preserving survivors. Thousands of them, kept alive somehow for 10,000 years beneath the Imperial Palace. A loud metallic clang echoed from the corridor behind me. I spun around instantly toward the open blast door. The darkness outside no longer looked empty. 3 tall figures now stood motionless beyond the entrance, watching me silently. Their bodies were covered in long black robes that concealed nearly every feature beneath heavy shadow. None of them moved. None of them spoke. Yet the moment I saw them, I understood instinctively that they had not come to help me. One of the figures slowly tilted its head sideways with unnatural precision. Then, in a voice that sounded disturbingly mechanical beneath the robes, it spoke a single sentence. "Unauthorized truth exposure detected." The chamber lights abruptly shifted from dim red to blinding white. Alarms screamed across the vault instantly, and all around me. The preserved humans inside the cylinders began waking up. The screaming started one cylinder at a time. At first it was only the little girl nearest to me, her tiny fists pounding weakly against the glass while bubbles escaped her mouth into the pale preservation. Fluid surrounding her body. Then another voice joined hers farther down the vault. Then another, then hundreds. Within seconds, the entire chamber became a cathedral of human agony echoing beneath the foundations of Holy Terra. I stood frozen between the rows of awakening containment cylinders, while ancient survivors of a dead species opened terrified eyes all around me. Some screamed silently, others clawed desperately at the glass imprisoning them. A few simply stared outward in exhausted horror, as though they had awakened from a nightmare only to discover the nightmare had never ended. The sound shattered something deep inside my mind, because for the first time in my life, I realized I had never actually heard real human fear before. Not truly. Citizens of the Imperium cried, panicked, begged, worshipped, but there had always been something strangely muted about modern emotion, something constrained beneath layers of conditioning and ritual. These people were different. Their terror felt raw enough to infect the air itself. The hooded figures standing beyond the vault entrance remained perfectly motionless, despite the chaos unfolding around us. Blinding white lumen lights illuminated portions of their robes now, revealing smooth black armor hidden beneath the cloth. Their faces still remained concealed inside shadowed hoods, but I could hear faint mechanical clicking noises emerging from somewhere beneath the fabric, like machine parts adjusting themselves while they watched me. Then, the tallest figure stepped forward slowly into the chamber. Its movements were horrifyingly precise, not stiff like a servitor. Worse, too controlled, too efficient, like something imitating human motion after studying it for centuries without fully understanding it. "Archive contamination irreversible," the figure said calmly. Its voice sounded layered somehow, multiple tones speaking simultaneously with perfect synchronization. "Witness exposure exceeds acceptable threshold." I backed in, away instinctively until I struck one of the containment cylinders behind me. The ancient woman floating inside pressed both hands desperately against the glass near my shoulder. Tears streamed openly down her face. Actual tears. I stared at them in disbelief for half a second before realizing something even more horrifying. I could not remember the last time I had ever seen a modern Imperial citizen cry real tears. Suddenly, the chamber trembled violently beneath our feet. Somewhere deep below the vault, enormous machinery roared awake after millennia of dormancy. The containment cylinders around me flickered as preservation fluid began draining rapidly from hidden vents beneath each pod. Panic erupted throughout the chamber. The preserved humans pounded frantically against the glass while warning sirens echoed from every direction. Red emergency symbols flashed across ancient cogitator screens overhead. Termination protocol initiated. Species preservation. Failure detected. No, I whispered instinctively. The hooded figure turned its hidden face toward me. Baseline specimens cannot be permitted contact with post-extinction populations, it replied without emotion. Psychological destabilization risk unacceptable. Then the cylinders began opening. Glass shattered across the chamber floor as ancient preservation seals failed one after another in deafening succession. Human bodies collapsed from their pods, choking violently on fluid and air, while alarms screamed around us. Some survivors were too weak even to crawl. Others staggered blindly through the chamber in confusion, staring at the vault around them with expressions of unbearable terror. Many appeared disoriented, as though they remembered dying thousands of years ago and could not comprehend why they were suddenly awake again beneath an alien world. A middle-aged man stumbled toward me, clutching his chest while preservation fluid dripped from his gray hospital garments. His eyes looked impossibly alive compared to anyone I had ever known. Fear, confusion, hope, grief. Entire oceans of emotion moved across his face in seconds. "What year is this?" he gasped desperately. I opened my mouth to answer, but no words emerged. How could I explain 10,000 years of horror to someone who still remembered humanity alive? Behind him, another survivor, a woman holding the hand of a frightened young boy, stared upward toward the massive Imperial Aquila symbols hanging from the vault ceiling. "What happened to Earth?" she whispered. "Earth, not Terra. Earth." The ancient word sounded almost forbidden, spoken aloud. Before I could respond, the hooded figures finally entered the chamber completely. The survivors nearest to them froze instantly in confusion. One old man even stepped forward hopefully, as though expecting rescue. Then the nearest hooded figure reached up calmly and lowered its hood. Several survivors began screaming immediately. I understood why the moment I saw its face, or rather the absence of one. Smooth, pale flesh stretched across the front of its skull, entirely uninterrupted. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Nothing human remained except the general shape of a head. Thin black cables disappeared beneath the skin around its neck, pulsing faintly like artificial veins. The creature tilted its featureless face toward the survivors surrounding it. "Humanity preservation remains active," it announced mechanically. "Please remain calm." One of the survivors attacked it. Instantly, a young man no older than 20 lunged forward with a scream of pure rage and smashed a broken shard of containment glass directly into the creature's throat. Black fluid sprayed across the chamber floor. The hooded thing staggered backward briefly before calmly grabbing the man's wrist. There was a loud cracking sound. The survivor collapsed screaming as his arm bent sideways unnaturally. Then the creature snapped his neck with horrifying efficiency. Silence swept across the nearby survivors instantly. The dead man's body hit the floor with a wet, metallic echo. The hooded creature looked down at him for several seconds before speaking again in the same calm voice. Behavioral instability confirmed. More hooded figures entered the chamber behind it now, at least 12, all identical, all faceless. The survivors began retreating in terror deeper into the vault, while some cried openly and others simply stared in stunned disbelief at the monster surrounding them. I felt sick. My mind desperately tried to rationalize what I was seeing, but the truth had already become unavoidable. These creatures were not merely hiding humanity's extinction. They were what came after. They were descendants of whatever the Imperium had become over 10,000 years of war, genetic manipulation, cybernetic alteration, and endless psychological conditioning. Humanity had not survived the age of strife. It had evolved or devolved into something else entirely. One of the survivors suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. The little girl from the containment pod stared up at me with trembling eyes filled with tears. "Please," she whispered. "What are they?" I looked toward the faceless creatures advancing slowly through the vault beneath the screaming alarms and flickering emergency lights. Then I answered with the only truth left. "I think," I said quietly, "they're us." For several seconds after I spoke those words, nobody moved. The survivors stared, at the faceless beings in silent horror, while the emergency alarms continued screaming throughout the vault like the cries of some wounded mechanical god buried beneath Terra. I could see the realization spreading slowly across their faces. These creatures were not aliens, not demons, not machines. They were descendants. The final shape of mankind after 10,000 years trapped inside the Imperium's endless nightmare. One of the survivors, a gray-haired woman whose preservation robes still hung dripping around her thin frame, covered her mouth with shaking hands and began sobbing openly. "No," she whispered repeatedly. "No, no, no." The sound nearly broke me, because even now, after everything I had witnessed, some part of my mind still resisted the truth. I wanted this to be a lie, a hallucination caused by forbidden knowledge buried too long beneath the palace. But the creatures standing before us were undeniably real. And worse, the more I looked at them, the more familiar they seemed. The proportions of their bodies matched ours almost perfectly. Their posture, their movements. Even the structure of their pale skin resembled humanity distorted gradually across unimaginable centuries. Evolution shaped by war, radiation, cybernetic modification, chemical manipulation, and psychic corruption. This was not extinction in the simple sense. Humanity had not vanished instantly. It had rotted slowly into something unrecognizable while desperately pretending otherwise. One of the faceless figures stepped toward us again. Black fluid still leaked slowly from the wound in its throat where the survivor had stabbed it, yet the creature showed no sign of pain. Tiny metallic tendrils moved beneath the damaged flesh, repairing the injury before my eyes. "Remain compliant," it said calmly. "Panic response, unnecessary." The little girl beside me tightened her grip on my arm. "It talks like a machine," she whispered fearfully. She was right. The creature's voice carried no emotion whatsoever. Yet strangely, it attempted emotional patterns in its speech, like something imitating humanity from archived recordings. I suddenly remembered how Imperial citizens behaved above Terra's surface. The dull expressions, the strangely synchronized reactions, the empty rituals repeated endlessly across the Imperium. Had we all been imitating humanity for so long that nobody remembered what genuine emotion looked like anymore? Another survivor suddenly shouted from deeper within the vault, "Look at the symbols." Several of us turned instinctively toward the far wall where massive ancient murals stretched across the chamber beneath layers of dust and age. The emergency lights illuminated them more clearly now than before. I felt my stomach twist painfully the moment I understood what they depicted. The murals showed the history of Old Night, human worlds burning beneath warp storms, cities collapsing into mutation and plague, entire populations twisting into monstrous forms under uncontrolled psychic evolution. Then came another series of images even more horrifying. Scientists, geneticists, technicians working desperately beside enormous laboratory chambers while human bodies floated inside artificial wombs connected to massive machines. At the center of every mural stood the same towering figure watching silently over the process. The Emperor. But not the Emperor as modern Imperial iconography portrayed him. This version looked tired, haunted, desperate. Beneath the murals, ancient Gothic text stretched across the stone in faded gold lettering. One of the survivors stepped closer and read it aloud with trembling voice. "Project Reclamation. Preservation of cognitive human identity through adaptive biological succession." Silence followed the words. Then the old woman beside me whispered the realization none of us wanted to face. He replaced us. Her voice cracked with grief. The Emperor replaced humanity. A violent tremor suddenly shook the entire vault. Dust rained from the ceiling, while distant explosions echoed somewhere far above us, through the buried foundations of Terra. The faceless beings reacted instantly, all turning their featureless heads upward simultaneously, like predators sensing danger. Then the nearest creature spoke again, though its calm mechanical tone carried something new now. Urgency. Containment breach escalating. Unauthorized truth propagation detected across upper archive sectors. Another explosion thundered overhead. The lumen lights flickered violently. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, alarms from other sections of the underworld began activating one after another. I stared toward the ceiling in confusion. What's happening? The creature tilted its smooth face toward me slowly. Information contamination spreads exponentially once baseline recognition occurs. It replied, exposure event threatens systemic stability. Then I understood. The truth itself was dangerous. Not symbolically, literally dangerous. The moment people learned humanity had already gone extinct, the psychological foundation of the Imperium began collapsing. Billions of citizens across Terra lived entirely through faith. Faith in the Emperor, faith in humanity's survival, faith in the Imperium's divine purpose. Remove that belief and the entire civilization could shatter overnight. The survivors around me slowly began understanding the same thing. One of the younger men looked toward the murals again with tears in his eyes. So he lied to everyone, he whispered. For 10,000 years. No. Another voice answered quietly behind us. Every person in the chamber turned instantly. A new figure stood at the vault entrance now. Unlike the faceless beings, this individual wore dark crimson robes, marked with ancient imperial sigils, almost completely erased by time. The figure's face remained hidden beneath a hood, but something about their presence immediately felt different. Older, heavier, more human. The faceless creatures stepped aside silently as the newcomer entered. Then the hood lowered slowly. Gasps spread across the chamber. The old man standing before us looked impossibly ancient. His skin was thin as parchment stretched across visible veins and ancient scars. One side of his face had been replaced entirely with decayed cybernetics humming softly beneath exposed wires. But his remaining eye looked unmistakably human. Real human emotion burned inside it. Grief, exhaustion, shame. He did not lie for power, the old man said softly while looking at the terrified survivors surrounding him. He lied because the alternative was extinction. Nobody spoke. Even the faceless beings remained perfectly motionless behind him. The old man glanced toward the murals with visible pain. When old night consumed mankind, baseline humanity began collapsing genetically across every known system. Radiation, warp corruption, forced evolution, artificial adaptation. Entire populations became biologically incompatible with the species they once were. His voice grew quieter. The Emperor tried everything: preservation vaults, genetic purification, selective restoration. Nothing worked. He gestured weakly toward the survivors emerging from the shattered containment cylinders. You are the last stable remnants. The little girl beside me stared upward at him with frightened eyes. Then why keep us here? The old man closed his eyes slowly for several seconds before answering. Because he could not bear to watch humanity truly die. Silence consumed the vault again, except for the distant alarms echoing through Terra's foundations. Then the old man spoke the words that finally shattered whatever remained of my old understanding of the Imperium. The species ruling the galaxy today is not human, he whispered. It is humanity's memorial. The old man's words settled over the vault like funeral ash. Humanity's memorial. Nobody spoke after that. The survivors stood motionless among the shattered containment cylinders while pale preservation fluid spread slowly across the floor around their bare feet like melted ghosts. Even the alarms suddenly seemed farther away now, drowned beneath the unbearable weight of understanding. I looked around the chamber again, but everything felt different after hearing the truth spoken aloud. The faceless beings no longer resembled monsters to me. They resembled descendants standing at the grave of something they had inherited but could never truly become. And somehow, that realization frightened me more than hatred ever could. The old man walked slowly deeper into the vault, his cybernetic limbs producing soft mechanical sounds with every step. The faceless creatures followed at a respectful distance behind him like silent attendants serving a dying king. Up close I could see how damaged he truly was. Ancient scars covered nearly every visible part of his flesh. Tubes disappeared into his spine beneath the robes. One side of his jaw moved slightly out of synchronization with the rest of his face as though the muscles had been rebuilt too many times, over too many centuries. Yet despite all the decay consuming him, his remaining human eye still carried more life than anyone I had ever known above Terra's surface. He stopped beside one of the shattered preservation cylinders and gently touched the broken glass with trembling fingers. Inside lay the body of an elderly woman, too weak to survive awakening. She had died moments earlier on the chamber floor, wrapped in soaked preservation robes, her face frozen in exhausted confusion. The old man stared at her silently for several seconds before speaking again. She was a teacher, he said quietly. Born during the final years before Old Night consumed Earth. None of us understood how he could possibly know that, but the sadness in his voice sounded painfully genuine. She volunteered for preservation after the Atlantic Plague Wars. He swallowed slowly. She believed humanity would recover within a generation. The survivors around me exchanged frightened looks. The scale of time involved was impossible to comprehend. These people came from an age so ancient it existed now only as myth buried beneath imperial scripture. The little girl beside me stepped closer toward the old man cautiously. "How long were we asleep?" she whispered. He looked at her with visible pain. Approximately 10,611 Terran years. Several survivors began crying openly again. One man collapsed to his knees entirely, staring blankly at the floor while shaking uncontrollably. A younger woman simply covered her face and screamed, a raw, broken sound filled with grief too enormous for language. I understood her completely. Everyone they had ever known was dust. Every city, every culture, every memory of true humanity had vanished long before the Imperium even existed. The old man watched them mourn without interruption. Perhaps he understood there was no comfort left to offer. Eventually, one of the survivors looked toward the faceless beings standing silently around the chamber. "What are they called?" he asked weakly. The old man hesitated. For the first time since arriving, genuine uncertainty crossed his expression. "Officially," he replied, "adaptive human continuity strains." The survivors stared at him blankly, his eye lowered toward the floor. But over the centuries, they simply became mankind. One of the faceless beings turned its smooth, featureless face toward him immediately after those words. I noticed something strange then. The creatures reacted whenever he used emotional language. Tiny pauses, small hesitations, as though fragments of forgotten. Humanity still lingered somewhere deep inside them, struggling to understand feelings they no longer truly possessed. Suddenly, another violent tremor shook the vault. This one nearly knocked several survivors off their feet. Massive cracks spread across portions of the ceiling while ancient dust poured downward through the flickering lumen lights. Somewhere far above us, Terra itself seemed to groan in pain. The faceless beings reacted instantly again. "Psychic destabilization increasing," one announced. "Containment integrity failure imminent." The old man closed his eye with exhaustion. "It's spreading faster than expected." I stepped toward him. "What's spreading?" His gaze lifted toward me slowly. "The truth." The words chilled me more than anything else I had heard so far. "You don't understand what the Imperium truly is," he continued quietly. It does not survive through armies or fleets or even the Emperor's power. It survives because trillions believe humanity still exists. He gestured weakly toward the ceiling above us, where distant alarms continued echoing through the buried palace foundations. Belief shapes reality within the warp. Always has. The collective human identity became the foundation holding Imperial civilization together after Old Night. My stomach twisted as understanding slowly formed. If people stop believing, then the species finally dies, he finished softly. Silence spread across the chamber once more. Even the survivors seemed afraid to breathe now, because every one of us understood the implication. The Imperium was not merely hiding history, it was sustaining reality itself through denial. The Emperor had preserved the idea of humanity because the idea had become more important than biological truth. One of the younger survivors shook his head violently. No, that's insane. The old man gave a weak, bitter smile. Of course it is. Then suddenly, every faceless being in the vault turned toward the same direction simultaneously. Their heads tilted upward with mechanical precision. A low sound echoed faintly through the chamber several seconds later. Chanting, distant at first, then growing louder rapidly. The old man's expression darkened instantly. They found the upper archives. The chanting intensified until it resembled the roar of an approaching ocean. Millions of voices crying out somewhere above Terra's underworld. Not prayers, panic. I felt my blood turn cold. How many people know? I asked. One of the faceless creatures answered before the old man could speak. Current exposure estimates exceed 14 million individuals across primary hive sectors. Another tremor hit the vault harder than before. This time, several containment cylinders collapsed entirely, shattering across the floor in explosions of broken glass and fluid. Red warning sigils flashed across every remaining cogitator screen. Mass psychic event detected. A horrible realization struck me then. The warp. The old man nodded slowly. Human belief has sustained the Astronomicon for millennia, not merely psychic sacrifice, identity itself. His voice became barely above a whisper. If enough minds accept humanity's extinction simultaneously. He never finished the sentence. He did not need to. Every light inside the vault suddenly died at once. Complete darkness swallowed us instantly. Then somewhere far above Terra, something enormous screamed. Not human, not machine. Something ancient and wounded beyond comprehension echoing across the soul of the Imperium itself. And for the first time in my life, I realized the God Emperor of mankind had been suffering not to protect humanity from extinction, but to prevent humanity from discovering it was already gone. The scream did not fade. It layered itself into the darkness like a second reality bleeding through the walls of the vault. Even after the lights died, even after the alarms cut out mid-cry, that sound remained, stretching across impossible distances, as if Terra itself had become a throat tearing open around us. For several seconds, nobody moved. Not the survivors, not the faceless beings, not even the old man. We were all frozen in that black silence beneath the Imperial Palace while something far above the surface broke in ways no one had ever been allowed to witness before. Then the vault began to change. At first, it was subtle. A vibration beneath the floor, like distant engines reversing direction after millennia of stillness. Then the containment cylinders that still remained intact began to pulse with faint light. Soft blue at first, then unstable white, as though something inside the system was trying to wake up more than just the preserved bodies. The old man stepped forward into the darkness, his voice low. "It's begun." One of the survivors screamed back at him, "What has begun?" But he didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head upward, as if he could see through kilometers of stone, cathedral foundations, and buried history. "The collapse of belief," he said finally. A sharp metallic sound echoed through the vault, not from machinery this time, but from the faceless beings. They were changing. I saw it first in the nearest one. Its smooth, featureless face began to ripple slightly, like something beneath the skin was shifting position. Thin seams appeared where there had been none before, forming faint outlines that resembled forgotten facial structure trying to reassert itself. It stepped backward, then another one did the same. For the first time since I had seen them, they were afraid. A survivor grabbed my arm tightly. "They're reacting to it," she whispered, "to whatever that scream was." The old man nodded without looking at her. "The Astronomicon is destabilizing." I didn't fully understand what that meant, but I understood the tone of his voice. It wasn't explanation anymore. It was admission. Above us, the Imperium was failing. Not politically, not militarily. Structurally, reality itself. The vault trembled again, harder this time. A shockwave rolled through the chamber and shattered several already damaged cylinders, releasing more preserved humans onto the floor. Some of them were unconscious. Others were awake, crawling weakly through shattered glass and fluid, crying out for a world that no longer existed. One man crawled toward me, grabbing my robe. "Where is Earth?" He gasped again, like before. "Where is everyone?" I couldn't answer him because I suddenly realized I didn't know how to define everyone anymore. Was it the people above us chanting in panic? Was it the preserved dead waking beneath the vault? Was it the faceless beings watching us struggle? Or was it something else entirely? Something that had already ended long before any of us were born. The old man moved toward a central platform in the chamber, where an ancient cogitator core still pulsed faintly beneath layers of dust and corrupted data lines. He placed his hand on it, and for a moment I thought it would reject him. Instead, it responded. A holographic aid projection flickered into existence above the core, not stable, not clean, fragmented. At first it showed stars, millions of them, then war, then fire spreading across entire galaxies, then something worse, an image of humanity not as a species, but as a pattern repeating itself across distorted timelines, and beneath it all, a single phrase burned in fractured Gothic. Continuity, failure, detected. One of the survivors fell to his knees. "What does that mean?" The old man's voice broke slightly. "It means the system can no longer maintain the illusion." The faceless beings reacted instantly to that word. Illusion. Every one of them turned toward him at once. Their movements were no longer synchronized. They were glitching, stuttering. Some stood perfectly still while others jerked in small, unnatural increments, as though their bodies were trying to decide what shape they were supposed to be. One of them spoke, but its voice was no longer stable. Identity cohesion, failing. Another added, slower, fractured, baseline narrative, collapsing. The old man stepped away from the core. "They were built to preserve humanity after extinction," he said quietly. But over time, preservation became replacement. He looked at them, really looked at them, and replacement became identity. The nearest faceless being took one step forward, then stopped. For a brief moment, its smooth face seemed to split. Not physically, but perceptually, as if my mind was briefly allowed to see something underneath it. A face, almost human, almost. Then it snapped back into featureless smoothness like reality correcting itself. The creature spoke again, but this time its voice was softer, confused. "Who are we?" No one answered, because none of us knew what the correct answer was anymore. The vault shook again, this time violently. Entire sections of the ceiling collapsed somewhere far beyond our sight. Dust and debris poured into the chamber like falling ash from a dying sky. The surviving cylinders flickered one last time before shutting down completely, plunging most of the chamber into unstable darkness, broken only by intermittent emergency sparks. The old man turned toward me. "This is what happens when truth escapes containment," he said. I swallowed hard. "Then why show us?" His eye softened slightly. "Because containment was never meant to last forever." A distant roar echoed through the vault. Not mechanical, not human. Something enormous shifting far above Terra's surface, like an entire civilization trying to remember how to breathe. The faceless beings all turned upward again. But this time, None of them spoke. They were listening. And for the first time since I had entered the archives, I understood something terrifying. Whatever humanity had become, it was not alone in its denial. It was part of something much larger. And that structure was now breaking apart. The old man looked at the collapsing vault around us and whispered the final truth before everything changed again. "The Emperor is not hiding humanity's extinction," he said. "He is delaying its consequences." And then the lights returned, but they were not red, not white, not imperial. They were something new, something the Imperium was never meant to see. And above us, the sky of Terra itself began to open.